All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to each and every one of you. I am very happy to be once again joined by all of you, and I hope that you have had a wonderful start to the week. Hopefully, Monday wasn't kicking your butt too much, and I trust that in the hour or so that you and I are going to be spending together, it's going to be fun. If nothing else, we do need a good laugh every once in a while. And, if you can't laugh because something is funny, maybe you can laugh because something is so miserable that you just, what else are you going to do? Right. So, in all things, I hope to bring you the news, bring you the truth, tell you what is actually happening and what I think of everything. And then obviously have you guys give me some of your thoughts about where this country is ultimately headed. The Good Shepherd, how you doing? Adon, how you doing? Robbie, how you doing, sir? And Acora Digital Media, how you doing? Vern De Beer, Vern, how you doing, sir? Laugh not to cry. I think that's a skill that we as South Africans have mastered. No, you sort of stand around the braai place or the braai, and you just sort of go, well, lol. What else is there to do? What else? If we genuinely cried about all the things that is tier worthy in this country, we would never stop. Because every single day, things in this country are falling apart. Every single day, there is something worse that happens. And so I think South Africans have just sort of learned to laugh at it and just make jokes and make fun of it, because what else is there to do? And of course, there's much more to it than just generally speaking. There's something that I've been thinking about for a while now. And to be fair, I don't think I can make a video out of it, because Siege Garden, how you doing? Jaguar, how you doing? Peter Pan, how you doing? Echo, how you doing, brother? Peaceful Citizen, how you doing, sir? Someone, how you doing? I don't know how to make a video out of this, right? But I can probably tell you guys here. One of the things that has to change, it has to change. And this is worldwide. I'm not just talking to the South Africans here. If you're European, you are in exactly the same place as we are. CR, how you doing? Conrad, how you doing? You are literally where we are now. The only difference is you're at the beginning of it. You have not yet reached the end. But one of the things that I have come to realize about the current world and how it exists is that the ordinary people, you and I, normal people, are being governed by terrorists. We are being governed by the extremists. And that is why when we notice ordinary things, so just normal things that happen in this world, I'll give you guys a great example. When I notice that BEE and affirmative action has destroyed the economy of this country. By the way, there are now so many economic reports that all show that South Africa is losing billions of rands. This latest report shows that South Africa is losing an estimated 226 billion rand every single day as a result of BEE. Now, by losing, they don't mean that the money is just disappearing and no one knows where it is. It's talking about money that is supposed to come into the country in terms of investments, businesses being built, people getting salaries, spending those salaries on other things. This is what it means, right? All of that is gone because these companies are not investing in South Africa. Now, if I notice this, if I say that, oh boys, this is really bad, I am called a white supremacist. I am called a racist. I am called anti-transformation. Now, how is it possible that just by noticing, there's a documentary that came out, I can't remember the guy's name, but I watched the documentary a couple of days ago, where this guy literally said, noticing reality is now considered racist. If you just notice reality. So, for example, if you live in the UK and you notice that immigrants is a bit of a problem, right? Because you have all sorts of immigrants that are stabbing young boys These boys are then handcuffed by the police. And by the way, I don't know if you guys saw the newest body cam footage that was released, but it's not good. In the Henry Novak case, it's not good. Henry Novak, you can hear it in his voice, you can hear it in his breathing. He's struggling to breathe. He tells the officers, I think I've been stabbed. Not I think, I have been stabbed. I'm struggling to breathe. And the cops are going, I don't think you have, mate. I don't think you have. They handcuff him, making it harder for him to breathe. And then they just let him lie in the gravel, in the dirt, while he dies and bleeds out. This is the level of things that we have to achieve, that we have to contend with. And if you notice that, right, if you go, wait a second, but there's a lot of immigrants here that is causing a serious amount of trouble, you're immediately labeled as a supremacist, as a hater, as a racist. Think about South Africa. If you're an ordinary South African and you happen to notice that, hold on, boys, there's a lot of foreign illegal immigrants in this country, and our country can't really support all of these foreigners. You know, legal or illegal doesn't even matter. And by the way, anyone that wants to cry, oh, but there's also like Fikile Mbalula that wants to pretend like there's also white illegal foreigners in the country, which, by the way, show them to me. Like, how many white people from the rest of the world do you think is clamoring to get into South Africa so hard that they would come illegally? You know, like, no one is falling over themselves to try and flood into South Africa. It's a hellscape. The people who are coming here, they might want to be here because it's quite cheap if you work for a company in the UK or in the European Union or in America to live here in South Africa. But no one is going to break the law just to set foot here in South Africa, right? What the hell are you talking about? But anyways, don't even come at me and pretend like, oh, but the white immigrants are fine. Yes, they are. Because guess what? The white immigrants coming into South Africa aren't working for South African companies. They're working for American companies, for European companies, for UK companies. They're not here taking jobs from the people in South Africa that don't have the jobs in the first place. That is not true for a Kenyan or a Ghanaian or a Nigerian foreign national. What, are they working for all of these major conglomerates of Kenya? I don't know, last time I checked, Kenya doesn't have that many conglomerates that operate internationally. Last time I checked, I don't see many Nigerian nationals working from home, right? Working for these big Nigerian companies, bringing millions of rands into the economy that otherwise doesn't have to be here. So fundamentally, if you're a black person on the streets noticing that, hey, there's a lot of foreigners here that is taking jobs that already don't exist from us, that makes you an extremist. Like, so noticing reality is what makes you an extremist. The problem I have with that, right? The problem I have with that is that it suggests that if you see reality and you're racist, that the people who govern over you are the extremists themselves. And they view any position that isn't as extreme as theirs to be absolutely sacrosanct. Take, for example, what the ANC says here. The ANC rejects attempts to portray transformation as a threat to economic growth or investment. South Africa's constitutional democracy is founded on the principle that economic inclusion and growth must go hand in hand. In other words, if you think that employment equity and transformation of the economy is racist, and is destroying our economy, congratulations, you are now a racist. And yet, we all know that it's destroying the economy. In my video, I go into a lot more detail. That video will be out by 5 o'clock this afternoon, so you guys can wait for that. It's available to members, by the way, if you want to watch it. So I'm not going to go into everything here about this story, but I will just highlight one thing that I discussed right at the end of the video. And that is, on the face of it, if we want to be super sort of charitable towards the ANC, we have to admit that transformation, insofar as I'm drinking Milo at the moment. And the only reason I'm drinking Milo is as I went downstairs to get coffee, I realized that I had drank the last of my coffee and I had like 5 minutes left. So I couldn't quickly go to the shop to buy coffee so that I could actually have coffee. So I'm drinking Milo with like nothing in it. It's just Milo. And it's not the greatest drink, but it's something hot and that's good enough, I guess. I'm usually restricted to 1 cup of Milo a day, and I try to drink that at the end of the day after I ate, but it'll have to do for now at least. Um, what was I saying again? What was I talking about? Oh, yes. If we want to be super charitable towards the ANC here, we would have to say that transformation, in so far as theoretically speaking, isn't actually bad for the economy. Notice how the ANC also likes to frame the argument. They don't say that the BEE and affirmative action policies of the ANC is what's hampering economic growth, which is the argument that people make. They frame it from a communist perspective, saying that the attempts to portray for transformation as a threat. No one in this country has ever said that transformation of the economy is what's destroying economic growth or investment. That's not what people are saying. What people are saying is that your laws is destroying the economy and economic growth in this country. So, in other words, your attempts at transformation is destroying this economy, not the transformation itself, because transformation in and of itself, probably not that bad, right? Probably not that bad. In fact, probably really good. If it was possible for you to transform the economy where black people are ultimately earning on average the same as white people, that's amazing for the country because you have 10 times more black people than what you have white people. And this is where I want to speak to the freedom fighters in our midst. If there are any communists that are watching this, although most communists don't like watching people that challenge their authority or their beliefs, but if there are any communists watching, or maybe socialists who are watching, I want you to understand something. Even if the ANC's transformation goals were absolutely super successful, there are around 1.7 million working-aged white people in South Africa. People who have jobs, about 1.7 million. So let's go to 2 million. Let's say there are 2 million working-aged white people in this country that are actively working. If you manage to transform the economy and took all 2 million jobs from the white people and gave them to the black people, you have just lowered the unemployment in South Africa from 27 million to 25 million. You still have the bulk of your people either completely unemployed or unemployed to the point where they qualify for grants. So you have literally made no one any richer. Nothing. You have not created new jobs. You've not done it. You've literally done nothing. So when we notice this, somehow I'm the extremist here for noticing that the ANC's laws are not in fact transforming the economy. But that's because a lot of people look at the economy and don't realize that everything the ANC is doing isn't for economic empowerment. In fact, it has nothing to do with it. B is the ANC's slush fund. And all you have to do is think about this very logically. If Starlink came into South Africa tomorrow, right, and BEE was forced upon Starlink, how many black people do you guys know that live in Soweto would be able to afford 30% of Starlink shares? And just off the top of your head, do you think the guy that is working in your garden, or the lady that's working in your kitchen, or the guy that works at the spaza shop, do you imagine that he's going to be buying 30% of Starlink? Of course not, right? Determining how you doing, bro. Exactly. Not at all. It's not going to happen. So who is benefiting from the Starlink forced sale? The black people that already have the money. those are the ones that's benefiting from it. So, in other words, all it is the cadres getting to make themselves even richer. Employment equity, on the other hand, is again not about actually fixing the economy, and I can do it very quickly and very easily. If the minister, do all of you know what employment equity is? I'm sorry. I'm sort of talking about employment equity as if everyone understands what it is, but I want to be sure that people actually know what it is that I'm talking about. Okay, so there's at least one. Brendan, how you doing, sir? Knight, how you doing? CR, how you doing? David, how you doing? By the way, if I'm not saying hello to you, please understand I am seeing your comments. I just don't, I don't want to interrupt the whole time to say hello, but I am grateful that you are here nonetheless. Okay, so employment equity, very simply, is affirmative action on steroids. So where affirmative action was this sort of companies have to be able to show that they at least tried to give the job to a black person before they gave it to a white person. Employment equity is the state now forcing it, right? So the state says, let's say, for example, you're a bank, and in your bank, you have 100 people in management, you have 100 people working just below management, and you have 100 people working the floor. Employment equity now steps in and says, of every single one of these levels, 95% of them must be black. Must. So it's no longer a case of you have to try at least to give the job to a black person. Now you must go and find this black person, wherever they might be, because if you have 40 people out of your 100 managers who are white, you are in breach of employment equity. And this means you have to either, one, fire some of your white people, or two, you have to hire more black people in management in order to reach that made up goal. It is completely made up. The minister has the right to determine those numbers by themselves. The legislation kind of alludes to it. It has to adhere to the national sort of population breakdown, but that's not a rule. The minister can absolutely step in and say 100% of everyone that you hire must be black. And the minister only needs to give some kind of argument for why this is necessary. And then that's good enough, right? As far as they're concerned. So effectively, companies are now going to be forced. Now, let's again look at the reality of South Africa. You suddenly have to find 95% more people, or you need to find more people in your company that can do the job. In a country where education is absolutely abysmal, the vast majority of people that have an education in this country is barely more educated than a talking parrot. And FYI, I don't just mean black people, because look at people like Pieter Kriel. I do not consider Pieter Kriel to be much more educated than a talking parrot. In fact, I kind of feel bad for the parrot, because the parrot may actually have come up with a lot of the words himself, whereas Pieter Kriel just speaks with whomever's mouth is currently paying his bills. But nevertheless, the vast majority of young people in this country, and by the way, you can talk to people who are in business, and the one thing I hear from people who are in business is that they don't want to hire young people in South Africa at all. I have quite a few friends who work for very large companies in South Africa, and they all say the exact same thing. Their companies are working overtime to try and figure out how do we employ less people, because they don't want to hire young people in South Africa. And the reason they don't want to hire young people in South Africa is twofold. One, young people in South Africa don't know how to work. And two, young people in South Africa don't know anything. You get a young person, and this story is a story that I was actually told. A young guy coming out of university, studied accounting, started work in a very large multinational company here in South Africa in the accounting department, didn't know how to do accounting, didn't even know the bare basics. They have a degree in accounting, but they don't know how to do it. So now I have to hire a bunch more people just to be able to reach the targets. And then of course you have to attach this to even more, because what you have to understand is that most companies aren't investing in South Africa because of South Africa, right? Do you actually believe that a company like BMW has factories in South Africa because of all the millionaires that live in South Africa, or all the middle class that's living in South Africa? No. No African country has enough middle class people for a company to actually invest in that country for that country. Africa's benefit has always been the fact that it has put together enough middle class people that it actually matters. And so South Africa has only ever benefited because it happened to be the one advanced economy in Africa where companies could invest here and then get the other customers in the rest of Africa. But that's changing. That's disappearing now. In fact, most companies now, I think, is going to look at South Africa and just go, well, I could be investing in Ghana or in Kenya or in Nigeria, or, and this I didn't even, like, this is a country that most people don't even think about. Just FYI. And Hard Talk, we'll get to that because that's definitely part of it. But most people don't even think about, I know of people who are now moving to Mauritius. They're taking their entire lives to Mauritius. Why? Because Mauritius have been lowering their taxes year on year to where they have much lower taxes than the rest of Africa. And they've been making it easier and easier to open businesses in Mauritius. So if you're a company like, say, Google or Amazon or Microsoft, why would you keep your head offices in South Africa being forced to hire a bunch of unhireable people if you could just open your business in Mauritius? You're still close enough to Africa that you can keep everything else going, but you could just be in Mauritius. It's much more beautiful, right? It's an island. It's awesome, right? And you don't pay as much taxes. You don't deal with as much crime. You don't deal with all of the asinine business policies. The fact of the matter is, the ANC is running out of the capital that was saved up under apartheid. Apartheid managed to put the ANC in a position where they've been allowed to coax for the last 32 years. Because thanks to apartheid, you had Night of Justice. I truly appreciate that, sir. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But thanks to apartheid, the ANC inherited a first world country. They inherited first world infrastructure, roads that actually work. They inherited a world class energy company in Eskom. They inherited a world class air travel, right, in SAA. They inherited a world class arms sector. They inherited world class harbors and ports, world class railways. In fact, South Africa was on the cutting edge in a lot of ways of of rail travel and railways. And you guys remember the blow train? That was huge, and it was one of the first in the world in terms of high speed rail networks. So that the ANC received all of these things, and as a result of this, the ANC was capable of saying, "Hey, yes, we have these asinine laws that really make it not that fun to do business here, but we're also the best in Africa to even begin. So you may as well just invest here, right? We are going to make it difficult for you. We're not going to really meet you where you are at, but we are going to, we're going to give you access to Africa." But that is changing. Do you guys know that South Africa just fell off the most the biggest manufacturing country in Africa? We're now number 2. I believe Morocco just took number 1 spot. So in terms of industrialization, Morocco is now more industrialized than South Africa. Why did this happen? 32 years of asinine policies. That's the issue. And if you're a company now in 2026 looking at where to invest, you might invest, right? Hey, peaceful citizen, thank you so much for 7 months part of the citizenship of this channel. I really appreciate you, sir. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you're a company looking to invest in 1997 or 2007, you're effectively looking at Africa and you're going, right, I can invest in Kenya. There's nothing there. I can invest in Ghana. There's nothing there. I can invest in Nigeria. There's nothing there. If I want to do business in Africa, there's only one country. I need to invest in South Africa. Now in 2026, that reality no longer really exists because now I'm looking at Africa and I'm seeing Ghana, I'm seeing Kenya, I'm seeing Nigeria, I'm seeing Morocco, although that's in the north, so very far away from the sub-Saharan Africa. But I'm seeing all of these other countries, and by the way, countries that seem to be very interested in doing business with the rest of the world. And I'm saying, okay, I could invest in South Africa because they technically have all of the infrastructure, but most of the infrastructure has fallen apart already. So even if I do invest there, I would have to spend billions of rands just to fix the infrastructure so that I can actually use the railways, for example. Or I could just go to Ghana, and yes, they don't have the railway, but if I'm gonna have to spend the billions to fix the railway in South Africa, I may as well spend the billions and just build the railway in Ghana. Right? So as a company, South Africa just no longer looks that attractive. And if BEE was the fuel, if affirmative action was the tender, employment equity is the match. The ANC's been warned. They've been warned time and again. And yet they double down, they triple down, they quadruple down because to them, it's all about themselves. They want their cake and they want to eat it too. They want BEE because that's how they get rich. And then they want affirmative action and employment equity because they hope that this will somehow transform the economy. My question to people and my assertion would be if you want to know what a law is supposed to do, don't listen to what the politicians tell you. Look at what the law actually does. Politicians will tell you all manner of nonsense. Right? They'll tell you all manner of nonsense. But what does it do? What happens as a result of this law? And I can tell you guys now, if you couple this with expropriation without compensation, there's not an economy left in South Africa. None. This country will be absolutely destroyed. With the ugly girl at the dance now? No, we're the hot girl at the dance, and as soon as you go to talk to her, her breath absolutely stinks. And then you start to notice that actually it's just a bunch of makeup. That's who we are. Because from the outside, South Africa still looks very attractive. It's once you start looking at trying to open a business here that you realize, wait, this is not a good idea. This is going to be a terrible idea. So yeah, I personally, I don't even know what to say. CR, you're absolutely correct. It is Clown Town. You know, we do seem to live in Clownland in this country. That if they were offered millions of dollars, but the only caveat is that they want to employ who they want, she said the ANC will say, go invest somewhere else. Anton, yes. This is exactly the ANC's perspective. And that is because the ANC doesn't understand how the economy works. It's as simple as that. None of them have ever opened their own businesses. So they don't know how this works. With regards to expropriation without compensation, I think other African countries will start calling this out. Ghana has already started after some Ghanaians had their properties essentially seized. Mm, yes and no. To be fair, I don't think that's why other African countries are going to point this out. Bandit, how you doing, sir? I think what's actually more going to happen here in South Africa is heading towards complete pariah status on the international stage, including in Africa. You see, thanks to mismanagement, this is often what is so incredible about the evil and their evil schemes, and that is that they often get caught inside the snare of the schemes that they dream up. So in South Africa, what happened as a result of the ANC and their asinine policies is unemployment is sky high, the economy isn't growing. You have a public that is getting increasingly more frustrated with the reality of what we're dealing with. And so thanks to lawlessness and an open border, a lot of the South African public is now looking at the black people that are here from the rest of Africa and saying, what the hell? We don't have jobs, and you guys are allowing millions of people to come into our country. And of course, the illegal foreigner that is here isn't to blame for being here. If a country has a technical border, but no one enforces the border, is it really illegal for you to walk across it? Right? So what fundamentally happens is these foreigners are not doing anything wrong by being here. The South African government failed by allowing it. And now the people of South Africa are demanding that these people go home. This is obviously causing a lot of outrage in Africa because a lot of these people are here because their own countries have fallen apart so badly. And obviously, those countries didn't care because that's just fewer people complaining. Um, but now you also have America that is starting to apply some interesting pressures to South Africa in a very different way, because America has reached out to Kenya, it has reached out to Ghana. We hear consistently about deals being struck between the American government and the Ghanaian government, between the American government and the Kenyan government, between the American government and the Nigerian government. And all of these deals are for massive economic investment from the Americans into these countries, which means that a lot of these countries are now going to start looking at South Africa and saying, if America doesn't like South Africa, but America likes us, that's good for us. Last thing we want is America to start liking them again and then moving us back, to the back of the line because South Africa gets first pick. So a lot of these African countries may just decide to ultimately throw South Africa under the bus because there's a lot more money waiting for them in America and a lot more money waiting for them in Europe. So that is definitely something that we have to keep in mind here. It's funny how the EFF and the ANC wants the borders gone, but the locals are rioting against it. Well, it's because they're ideologically captured. Remember, communism has this idea, and Karl Marx wrote about this. A peasant in Germany has much more in common with a peasant in Russia than what they could ever have in common with the capitalist of their own countries. This turned out to just be completely wrong. The peasant in Germany is far more German than he is a peasant. And so the peasant in Germany would rather side with the capitalist of Germany against the peasant of Russia than with the peasant of Russia against Germany. This was a fundamental mistake. But you kind of have to think through. Stephanie, how are you doing? You kind of have to think. You have to go further back, right? The Rainbow Nation project was never a project built for South Africa alone. South Africa was meant to be the trial run. This is why Europe still invests billions of dollars or euros into South Africa every single year. It's because if the Rainbow Nation works, the European leaders can point to South Africa and say to their people, see, more immigrants, more better. If the Rainbow Nation fails, the people of Europe will look to South Africa and say to their leaders, see, more immigration, not more better. So stop it. So, from the European leftists' perspective, getting the Rainbow Nation to work is paramount to the success or the overall success of the system. It is required, so to speak. And of course, it's not something that any of us ever stepped into. The black people in South Africa did not sign up for the Rainbow Nation. A lot of black people wanted vengeance. Those black people who did sign up to the Rainbow Nation simply wanted to live and be left alone. They're not getting what they want because the government obviously isn't leaving anyone alone. The white people who signed up thought that they were signing up for the Rainbow Nation. Obviously, that did not happen, right? Because the ANC also never really wanted the Rainbow Nation. It was thrust upon them by the Europeans in exchange for freedom. So you have this system where a lot of lies were exchanged and no one actually got what they wanted. There's actually an article. Let me see if I can quickly find this for you guys. There's an article in Common Sense today that I really wanted to speak to. Here it is. So the Common Sense has this article where they make the argument that the average Afrikaner, and I'll just read this excerpt for you. You guys can go read the full article by yourself. Why do Afrikaners vote en masse for the DA and not the Freedom Front Plus? The reason is largely counterintuitive. Afrikaners are moderate and centrist, and their driving political motivation is inclusion, not exclusion. They want to be part of South Africa and play a positive role there in the broad cosmopolitan sense of the thing. See, I would wager that this is a complete misunderstanding of the Afrikaner in South Africa. I'll just tell you guys this. I know far more Afrikaners who don't vote than what I know Afrikaners who do vote. In fact, the majority of Afrikaners that I know don't vote at all. And in this instance, you can't really blame them. If you are an Afrikaner in this country, there is zero reason for you to really vote. And I want this to make sense. Mathematically speaking, if you live in a country where the majority party, the party that gets the most votes, gets like 21% of the vote, voting matters for everyone. But if you live in a country where your population makes up less than 10% of the overall population, voting really doesn't matter. Because even if every single Afrikaner voting age voted for the Freedom Front Plus, they would get maybe 6-7% of the vote. If that. So what does that mean in the grand scheme of things? So I think what is actually happening isn't that Afrikaners en masse are moderate or care about inclusion. That's not why most Afrikaners vote DA. They vote DA to basically not give the ANC too much unchallenged power. It's not that they agree en masse with the DA or that they think the DA's policies is great. It's that they understand that the Freedom Front Plus, with the way it's set up, will never win an election. That will just not happen. And so from their perspective, it's probably better to throw your vote away on the DA than to waste your vote on the Freedom Front Plus. That's not anything negative about the Freedom Front, because I do actually think the Freedom Front Plus is a good party. But I also think that there are some things that's completely wrong with the Freedom Front Plus. And it's not even necessarily something that they are guilty of. It's something that I don't think they can escape. It's a legacy thing. The Freedom Front, for a time, was the Afrikaner only party. Just the Afrikaner party. And in the mind of a lot of South Africans, that suggests a sort of return to the old ways, right? Return to apartheid and whatnot. And by the way, please note what I'm saying here. The the FF Plus doesn't want apartheid back. They don't want a country where only white people get to participate. That's not the goal. But the perception is exactly that. This is why I have said, and I continue to say, what South Africa needs more than anything is a Christian conservative party that is completely non racial, but is culturally mega exclusive. What do I mean by that? A party that says, look, I don't care what your race is, but if you want to vote for me, you're voting for freedom. You're voting for conservatism. You're voting for Christian values. You don't have to be a Christian, but you have to believe that the Christian value set, the morality of Christianity is superior. You have to be a capitalist. You have to be conservative. If you have all of those things, you can vote for me because I will fight for you. I don't care what your race is. I don't care what culture you are. I will fight for you. But those are my principles, and that is all I stand for. I actually believe that party would have a massive opportunity in this country to make a genuine inroads, taking it away from race, taking it away from cultural groups. Because the truth is, it's not the government's job to look after a specific group of people. It's not the government's job to look after Afrikaners, or the government's job to look after the English, or the government's job to look after the black people, the Zulu, or the Xhosa, or the Sepedi, right? That's not the government's job. The government's job is to not oppress those groups and to allow those groups the freedom to look out for themselves. So, if an Afrikaner wants to start his own town in the middle of the Klein Karoo, he should be allowed to do that, right? That's his right. If an Afrikaner wants to come and build his own Afrikaans university, he should be allowed to do that. If a Zulu wants to build his own university, he should be allowed to do that. As government, the only real role that I have is not interfering. It's the exact same thing with religion. It is not the role or the job of the government to build churches. It's not the role or the job of the government to preach Christianity to the nations. Christianity and the moral framework of Christianity guides the government. But the government does not compel Christianity over another religion. The government does not say that only people who are Christian get to work or get to do this or get to vote. That's not what Christian government means. It means that when I make a decision, my decision is guided by the morality of Christ, the principles of Christ, right? But it's not that I'm forcing religion upon people, but as the government, I must allow freedom for religion. So I don't stand in the way of churches that want to be built. If someone wants to start a religion, they're allowed to do that. If someone wants to build a church, they're allowed to do that. And the government doesn't interfere in that process. That's what it means to be a government, right? That's what it should mean. So when a party like the Freedom Front says that they're for Afrikaners and for minorities, I think it creates the wrong perception for people. And it's that perception that makes it that people don't want to vote for the Freedom Front. Because ultimately it should be, we're not for anyone. We're for South Africa. You guys do your crap, right? As government, and this would literally be why I will never be elected president, no matter what party I ran for. Because my first speech ever would be, I cannot make your lives better. I cannot make you rich. There is nothing that I can give you as president of this country. The only thing I can do is get out of your way. That's it. If you want to be rich, go work for it. If you want to be famous, go work for it. If you want to be this, go do it. I can't do it for you. I can't build you a home. I can give you the freedom to build a home, but I can't build it for you. That's your job. All I can do is get out of your way. No one will vote for that because people like to be given things, right? But that's sort of the only thing a government can do is say, here's your freedom, go live it, you know? And I think that's what most Afrikaners want. If you understand how Afrikaners think, right? And by the way, Stefan Real, I will just say I'm not a fan of democracy. I am, in fact, a fan of monarchy. I do think kings are better. I don't think that. I think democracy is just a complete farce of a system. So I'm open to effectively any system that replaces it, including monarchies, because I at least when you're unhappy with your king, you have a little revolution, you cut off his head, and another guy goes and be king now. With democracy, it's all manner of horse trading, and no one actually gets anything that they really want, but people think they're living in a country where their voice matters, even though it doesn't. I mean, just look literally all around you. In which country in the West, apart from America, are the people who voted for the government actually getting what they want? Nowhere. The government gets into power and then they just do whatever they want anyways. So I hate democracy. I think democracy is a wicked and an evil system that should not ever have existed, because it doesn't work. I think democracy can work on a very small scale, but as soon as you get to a countrywide system, democracy doesn't work. Rian de Klerk, thank you so much for joining the membership, dude. Really appreciate you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So the system that I would propose to people, if you guys care, okay, I'll try and do it very quickly. I don't want to waste your time too much because we have other things to discuss as well. So, let me explain the system that I would suggest. My system would be you have democracy on the municipal level. So, in other words, your mayor and your town council, those are the people you vote for. They live in your town. They make laws that they themselves have to live under, and you can replace them at any given time for a better person. They also happen to be the people that have the most power over you because all taxes are moved to towns. The town is the one that applies the tax. The province taxes the town, not the people of the town. So whatever the town collects in taxes, a percentage of that gets paid to the province. The national government taxes the province because national government does almost nothing. National government has like one job, and that is the borders and to have a military. That's it. Nothing else. The rest of it is done by the provinces and by the towns. So the townspeople are the most important. Small people, you vote for them. They run the show for 3 or 4 years, and then you vote for someone else if they don't do a good job. Then from a provincial level, those people come from the towns, and they represent you in the province at the provincial level. And this is where towns get to negotiate with each other for things that they want. And then at the national level, you have a king. And effectively, it's a king where this guy governs and rules until people get tired of him. So when enough people in the country feel like the king or the president for life is no longer doing a good job, they can petition. And if the petition gets a certain number of votes, people can go vote for another president. But as long as the president does the job, he stays the president for as long as needed, because he doesn't have that much power to begin with. He's just sort of there to make sure that there is an army, because everything else is happening at the town level. It has nothing to do with you. So if the president goes, screw everyone, I'm going to build twice the military, the people of every town can literally just go, no, we don't care. And then they move on, right? Because the towns ultimately get to make most of the decisions. The king is just there to make sure that the towns don't attack one another. That's what I would do. It's in a nutshell. It's not like I actually have. Trust me when I say I have this government completely planned out. Completely. Every level of government, what every single area of that government should look like, how they should operate, what is the powers of the provinces, what is the powers of the towns, what is the power of the national government. All of this is played out, but it would take me 2 hours to explain it, and I'm pretty sure none of you actually care about the system that I dream of when I dream of the quote unquote perfect political system. Because it can't be perfect. There's no such thing as perfect. Humans can't build perfect. But the idea for me is to build a system that can last as long as possible. That's sort of the only that's the only goal for me. It doesn't have to last indefinitely. It just needs to last long enough, and it needs to provide enough freedom for people that when the system goes bankrupt or becomes corrupt, the people have the freedom to overthrow the system. Um, Agora Digital, maybe I'll make a video on it for members. Something that, and I'll see how the members respond to it. And if the members really enjoy it, I might make it public, right? But I don't want to, because I know a lot of people don't care about the make believe what if scenarios of the world. I think oftentimes it's just me that will spend like 4 hours sitting downstairs. And I genuinely will do this. I will sit downstairs on my couch, and while vaping, I'll just think about all of the potential problems with this system and how would this system deal with those problems. And oftentimes when things in South Africa happen, I'll be thinking about it. Okay, so what if this happened in my system? How would my system respond to this particular problem? And then I think about how can you solve for those issues so that they're not issues, but instead you can benefit from them in some way. So yeah, it's like it's for me at least, it's super fun to do that stuff. With all the politician hits going on, can you imagine how long the lives would be if they're in the line of succession? Martin, so I am a little bit. So my plans for succession would effectively look like this. Instead of having it be familial succession, I would instead see it as meritocratic succession. So that's right now where I am sort of on. So, for example, the king has at all times a deputy king, someone that is far younger than him. So that this person is sort of trained in matters of state, and slowly but surely. So this can be the president's son. It doesn't have to be, someone other than the president's son. But slowly but surely, the son, let's say the son, will be given more and more responsibilities. And so the people of the country can see how the son handles these responsibilities. And then upon the death of the father, the king, in this regard, the people will still have a voice. So it won't just be automatic succession. The people of the country can then say, we demand a vote. We don't like this new king. And we instead have someone else in mind that should become king. And so then the people can force that vote. And Parliament or Congress in this regard would have to accept the vote of the people, and then a new king will be crowned. So if the son of the president, or whoever the president fingered to be the next king, if that guy proves himself as a worthy king and the people feel like this guy is going to be a good king, they just don't have another vote. They're happy with this one. But if they do dislike it, there is ways for the people to get rid, or there are ways for the people to get rid of the king and to have another king installed in his place. Obi, well, we could do that as well, right? We could say in the Constitution, if the people vote to remove the king that is removed has his head chopped off in the town square. Everyone can go watch. That should make a little bit of fire under the king to be a good king, right? So capital punishment if you're no longer the king. So you could do that if you wanted to. I'd be okay with that because I understand how, good incentive for the king to not be a dick. But I understand how, how bad kings can be. And even though I understand that most kings weren't bad, a bad king can be really bad, right? I just still feel like it would be better than democracy. But I understand that there's people who really like democracy. And so, is what it is. Nobody wants to just be king. Nobody. True. Sadly, there's also a lot of incentive to be very corrupt, right? And so you do want to be in the old days, the way the system worked with that was the armies belonged to the noblemen. So the king wasn't really the king, right? Because if the king started peeing off the nobles had the armies to go and overthrow the king. So the king sort of had to do what makes the nobles happy. Otherwise, the nobles would get rowdy. So there was always this sort of baked into the system, this sort of accountability. And you would have to figure out how to do exactly that in this system. But now, before we get too far, sidetracked with my perfect political system, what do you guys think of this impeachment thing? Because the impeachment committee had their first vote yesterday, where they chose Ghana as the chairperson for the vote. Let me ask you guys this first. How many of you are at least a little bit more at ease with Ghana being the chairperson? Because one of my fears was that the ANC was going to shoehorn their own chairperson into it. I think my one fear here is that Rise Mzansi is effectively just ANC. Like, Rise Mzansi to me and the ANC has very little in the way of difference. So I would say that bothers me. Penny, how you doing? I can answer that. It is. Heartsoak, well, yeah, I think it's going to be a clown show. Well, I think what's interesting to me, scenario here. Think about Madlanga. So let me tell you guys why I am super excited for this issue, for the impeachment. Why I think impeachment is going to be an absolute nightmare for the ANC. Think about Madlanga. How many high-level officials have been arrested as a result of Madlanga? The answer is none, right? No one high up. Some lower-level guys maybe, but no one higher up. That wasn't the true catastrophe of Madlanga. The catastrophe of Madlanga is that the entire country now knows how corrupt the system is. That's been the catastrophe. The ANC, Cyril Ramaphosa, was hoping that through Madlanga, he would be able to sort of placate the South African public, sort of go, look, we're tough on crime. Here's another commission. And they thought that nothing would come of it. Instead, what has happened is the South African public now know exactly how corrupt the ANC is. They know exactly how corrupt the system is. I believe that this impeachment inquiry is going to be the same thing. And I actually believe that that's exactly why Ramaphosa is fighting so hard to stop it. Guys, think about this. Ramaphosa doesn't have to stop the impeachment committee. Ramaphosa has enough allies in the impeachment committee to survive impeachment. He has enough allies in the parliament to survive impeachment. There's no reason for him to block this impeachment committee. The only reason he's doing it, in my view, is so that the public doesn't find out. Because if the public finds out, it's game over. Because I don't believe that the money that was in Phala Phala is President Cyril Ramaphosa's money. I think the money that is on Palapala belongs to all of the criminals in the ANC. And so if Cyril goes through impeachment, it all gets exposed. Every last bit of it. Because there are a number of people on that committee that desperately wants Ramaphosa exposed because they see a gap for themselves. And that's the danger. That's why I don't even think Ramaphosa is going to go through with it. In fact, I would not be surprised if the courts do not grant Ramaphosa stay. Because remember, he's now gone to court to try and block the committee from investigating until the Constitutional Court has heard his appeal. He's appealing the decision and he wants the committee blocked. But if the court comes back and says you can't block the impeachment committee, their work continues whilst you're challenging the verdict from the Constitutional Court, I believe Ramaphosa resigns the very next day. And for anyone thinking, when you listen to Julius Malema and Carl Niehaus saying we'll continue to impeach him, you can't. Impeachment is only for a sitting member of government. If he resigns, you can't impeach him after the fact. He's no longer the sitting president of the country. He has already resigned. Now you would have to go to the courts and you would have to do a legal proceeding, at least from what I understand. And I'll be fair, I'm not a lawyer, but from what I've been able to find, you can only impeach a sitting member of government. It can't be. So, for example, Jacob Zuma can't now be impeached. He's not a sitting member of the South African government. If you want to find him guilty now, you have to have an actual criminal court case. The courts have to deal with that now. It's no longer the jurisdiction of Parliament. Murphy, how you doing? Thank you so much. Really appreciate you, Murphy. I'm happy to have you here. Well, the government is run like a cartel. It's just one mob boss being replaced by another that goes across the three big political commie parties, ANC, MK, and EFF. Not wrong, the determining, not wrong at all. His appeal will be a 2-hour word salad depicted with additional charges. Was the top 6 that ousted and instated Odabo with cupcakes? I have more faith in the case brought against Ramaphosa by the US carries more weight. I don't know what to make with the US thing. Like, I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I have much uncertainty about the whole US thing. Everything that's happening at the moment. I don't know why. I have this sense of uncertainty. The daughter is alive? Hartsock, how can you be so sure that nothing is going to happen? Like, what convinces you that nothing is going to happen? Yeah, I get that you're convinced by it, but I want to know why you're convinced by it. I agree, and as long as that feeling is there, I cannot rely on it. Siege, so my feeling, just to be clear, and I'm not saying this to you, I'm just saying in general, my feeling here isn't because I don't trust the US. That's not the case. The US is a fickle country thanks to their economic system. Thanks to the voting system in the US, there is no way of knowing what the next 4 years are going to look like. If Trump is voted out of office and the next guy comes in and he's a Democrat, how does things change now? Right. And that really is the big issue for me with relying on America to solve our problems here. I think there are things. So, for example, did you guys watch Ernst Ruth's update about their meeting in America? because that was cool. That was really cool. If you haven't watched it already, I highly recommend that you do. So Ernst Rutz effectively said, right, as part of like they had a bunch of discussions with the US government. But one of the things, if I remember correctly, one of the things that they discussed with the US government is in how the US government can help Afrikaners and ordinary South Africans. One of the ideas that apparently floated about is this idea of tariff free access to the American markets for companies that do not abide by BEE and affirmative action and the like. So if you're a company that doesn't want to do the stuff that the government says you have to do, you get tariff-free access in America. Now, I don't know exactly how that would work because the government could still effectively fine you out of existence. But that's certainly one way to go, right? That's certainly one idea. Because yeah, that's sort of it feels like that's exactly what's needed here. You know, we need countries to start putting pressure on South Africa. The commission is showing you the tip of the iceberg. The courts are already telling you the way they are swaying. Yes, but you can't export without government documents. Martin, well, yes, that is true. But as far as I know, there's nothing in our export legislation, at least at the moment, that says that the government can deny you export rights based on your employment equity or your affirmative action or anything to that, right? Mervin, sure thing, sir. You can email me. Shoot me an email and we can talk. I mean, I don't need much convincing of injustice under the old Nats. I certainly like the sentiment. Yeah, I like I said, I'm not entirely convinced that it would work, but I like the ideas, right? I like the way that they're thinking about allowing the free market to take care of the issues. It builds a stronger case for us getting self determination. There is literally a select few that controls the day. We know this. True. Pressure, more pressure needed. And I say, I'm afraid. Frank, absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Nothing will solve any African country ever to believe anything else is being naive. Gray. So if you say nothing, that suggests, could I ask, why do you believe that nothing could fix any African country ever? Because if you say nothing, right, does that then also mean that even if you had a group of Africans that were super conservative, Christian, the right values, that they would just not be able to run their country? What is the difference between self determination and separate development? David, the main difference is choice. The reason separate development didn't work is it was never given to people as a free choice. It was always forced. The government demanded that everyone must develop separately and then enforced it so everyone will develop separately. Humans don't do well with force. We don't like being forced. Uh, what self determination is a complete natural system. It allows for people to make. So I'll tell you guys something that I want to do. If I had the money for it, I sadly don't, but if I had the money for it, you know what I would do? I would go to the Klein Karoo next to the Orange River, just upstream or downstream from where Orania is, and I would buy a plot of land. Large plot of land. Let's go. And I would start my own Orania. But this one would be slightly different. In this one, I would say you have to be conservative. You have to be Christian. But I don't care what language you speak, and I don't care what race you are. You have to be Christian, and you have to be conservative. And I would work with psychologists to work out a questionnaire to ensure that I get people who are capitalists, that I get people who are Christian, and I get people who are conservative. Those are the people that move into that town. And the reason I want to do it is largely because that is what I believe should be the future of South Africa. But more importantly, I want to see if I build that town and it turns out it's just as successful as Urania at ensuring that there is no crime, there is community, the community is growing, the community is getting stronger, then you have just proven that it's not skin color, it's culture. It's how people believe. It's what people work towards, right? Because there's tiny little things in culture that we might differ on, and some people like dancing more, other people like sitting more. Those are small things. But I'm of the belief that if you agree on the big things, so you agree on Christianity, you agree on conservative values, you agree on capitalism, if those things are fine, I think you can build a wonderful society. I would advise you watch Frank Zanu on the topic. He will explain it more eloquently than I will be able to. Gray, so the reason I ask you, why do you believe it, right? If you say that nothing can ever make an African country succeed, right? The word nothing is what I took on there. It sounds to me, and I'm not saying that is what you're saying. I'm just saying it sounds to me like you're trying to make a genetic limitation argument. In other words, you're trying to make the argument that black people are genetically simply inferior, and therefore they will never be able to have a successful country. Now, like I said, that's what it sounds like, but I might be mistaken. So you might actually mean, thanks to how the majority of Africans think at the moment, nothing they do will ever fix it because they're sort of stuck in this communist mindset. If that's the argument you're making, so not an argument about genetics, but rather an argument about the plague that is communism, I absolutely agree with you. As long as Africa is dancing this or flirting with communism, Africa will never succeed. That I agree with. But if the argument is that black people are simply not smart enough or intelligent enough or genetically gifted enough, that I have a massive disagreement with. And the reason I will always give is Kim Heller, Pieter Kriel, Carl Niehaus are white as snow, and I consider them to be vastly inferior to any normal human being. In the same vein, Thomas Sowell is very black, and I consider him to be the smartest economist in the world, perhaps, that has ever lived. So if we're making arguments from genetics, I think people like Pieter Kriel and Kim Heller and Carl Niehaus challenge those arguments significantly because they're white and they're stupid as hell. To explain more bluntly, not all races and ethnicities possess the same proclivities. It's arrogant and ignorant to expect a different people to adopt our way of life and excel in it. It's crazy. Gray, but again, if you're making the argument that it's a racial thing and an ethnicity thing, do you not think it's better to make the argument that it's a cultural thing rather than a racial thing? Because culture matters, right? Culture has a significant impact on how people think and operate. And I would wager culture is far more to blame than race. For me, I think, CCS, how are you doing, sir? For me, I think a cultural shift in education can make a big difference, but once a system falls to corruption, it's very hard to uncorrupt it because politics attracts corruption by design. True. Why is Western culture superior? Sounds like you're assuming that. So Western culture is superior for a number of reasons, right? First among which is Christianity. Western culture doesn't happen to become superior before Christianity sort of sweeps Europe. In fact, Western culture is barbaric in the Roman times. It's a group of barbarians, pagans, sacrificing all sorts of strange and crazy things. Most of it has no civilization whatsoever. Christianity sweeps through the land, and suddenly you do start seeing a change in the way that Europeans think. Moreover, Europe has a number of things that work really well in its favor. And a number of historians have already highlighted this. Things like the Vikings, for example, and the Viking sieges. The way the Vikings would siege and attack constantly forced Europeans and European countries to adopt and adapt in the way that they work with information, the way they work with messengers, the way they work with information travel. All of these things was super important to try and stop the various movements. And because you had so many various small kingdoms all vying for power, all of this puts pressure on the European to continuously advance. But there was a time, right? There was a time where the Middle Eastern Egyptian was far more advanced than the white man in Europe. Far more. There was a time where the Ottoman Empire was by far and away the most advanced. There was a time even further back where the ancient Mesopotamian is more advanced, multiples more advanced than the ancient Greek or the ancient Roman. You have evidence of the great Zimbabwean empire that existed for a time that was also incredibly advanced here in Africa. The biggest issue that Africa has always faced has been geological. Africa is a very difficult country to actually house civilization in. And without civilization, you don't really get progress, not at the rate that you require it. Because Africa doesn't have water in the places that you need it that supports human flourishing and civilization. And without the technology to actually bring the water to where you live, you can't really grow. And so most African societies are forced to be nomadic, just moving about from place to place in order to survive. They don't really get to settle long enough to actually build the advancements required. So I would argue that before you jump to the racial argument, you look at the cultural argument. Because I will say, if the argument is racial, how is it that almost half of the white people in America vote Democrat? If it's a racial argument, every single white person in America should vote Republican. Because to vote for the Democrats is to be absolutely brain dead. If the argument is racial, 50% of the world's population would not be supporting communism. And those are whites. In Europe, about 50% of white Europeans support communism. I would consider that to be a severe mark of mental duress, if not complete and utter retardation. And yet, those are whites who vote for the most retarded system that has ever been invented on planet Earth. So if the argument is that it is racial, what happened to those whites? How are they so retarded? Did they miss the race lottery? Are they the stupid whites and the other whites are not the stupid whites? It's cultural. It happens in culture. Culture is what defines it, at least in my opinion. When it's mute, please watch Frank Zanu on the topic. I'll post it here. I fear you might assume I see any race as inferior or superior. Gray, no. I don't think that you see them as superior. You see them as different. But you do view some races of incapable of doing what other races have done. and this is where you and I fundamentally disagree. I view some cultures of incapable of doing what other cultures do. There I agree with you. There are cultures that are inferior and cultures that are superior. But I also believe that culture is changeable. You can change culture. You can get the blackest guy in South Africa that in his heart is a bigger Afrikaner than Eugene Terblanche. And you can get the whitest little snowflake in Pieter Kriel. The whitest little snowflake in Pieter Kriel. And he will be more left than Karl Marx. People are genetically different. That's not a controversial statement. No, people are genetically, but you seem to be saying that cult or genetic groups are genetically similar enough, which I argue is just not the case. Because genetically speaking, the differences I don't believe to be that large. Universities all over the world have been captured and families are being torn apart by an ideology that cannot sustain itself. True. Ever met a black guy listening to the most Afrikaans music ever? I have. Best Human Award. I know a black girl. I know a black girl who literally spends, I would say she's probably more Afrikaans than I am. Because I think the only time I've ever gone to an Afrikaans concert was when I was drunk at university. And they were where the alcohol was. And so I just happened to be in the same. I was looking for the alcohol. They were just sort of making noise in the background. Um, but she goes to Afrikaans shows in Pretoria every single weekend. She raises her little girl in Afrikaans. She listens to Afrikaans music. Way more Afrikaans than what I am, right? I don't even listen to music. So I don't necessarily buy into it. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but from what I understand, I think culture does a far better job of explaining the differences between people than what race does. I don't think it's helpful to focus on race because if it is race, people need to explain to me how 50% of white Americans vote Democrat. What happened to those race? Or like, what happened to them? Did they just miss out on genetic lottery? Give me the example in reverse, and you are not allowed to name Snotkop. Uh, David Smith, what do you mean examples in reverse? Echo with the 350 Rand donation, dude. Really appreciate you, sir. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You are far too kind. My good sir. Anita, how you doing? I don't know what band she goes to listen to, but she does listen to a lot of bands. It's arrogant to try to change a person's culture to your own. That's actually superiority. But great. Now we're talking about culture. And this I do agree on. I don't want to change anyone's culture here in South Africa, which is why I argue for self determination. I don't want the Zulu to adapt to how I think. Let the Zulu think the way that the Zulu wants to think. But I don't see why I have to be forced to think the same way that the Zulu does. This I don't understand. Right? In the same way, if you want to be a Pieter Kriel communist, by all means, go ahead, vote for Ramaphosa and starve. I'm happy with that. But I don't see why your stupidity should be an impact on me, which is why I'm for self-determination. Let every stupid person do what every stupid person wants to do, but I should not have to suffer for other people's stupidity. If Ramaphosa wants to be the world's most retarded president, that is his right. And more power to him. I'll vote for him on that because I actually think that is something he deserves. But that doesn't mean that I must suffer for that, right? I am perfectly capable of witnessing the stupidity of Ramaphosa without suffering it. So that's the only thing I'm asking for, which is why I'm for self-determination. I don't want to tell any culture what they can and cannot do, but I also don't want to suffer under it. Joe Texas, how you doing? Johan, how you doing, sir? Okay, Echo, your donation. Really appreciate you, good sir. Critics call Western countries' cultures bad, but can't specify what makes their cultures defective. Yet, these nations face immigration issues more than any other, while there is no immigration crisis in the DRC or Somalia. Um, I definitely don't believe. I think the West currently is suffering from years and years of indoctrination, with the idea being that the West just needs to accept its decline. And that's because a lot of white people have bought into this idea that the only reason Europe was ever rich is as a result of colonialism. If Europe doesn't have the ability to enslave half the world, then Europe is just always going to be poor and there's nothing Europe can do about it. Of course, that explanation completely misses the fundamental reality. When the Europeans arrived in Africa for the first time, they were way more advanced than the African. When the European arrived in India for the first time, they were way more advanced than the Indian. How did that advancement happen? If Europeans only got rich as a result of exploitation, how did they get so rich in order to be able to exploit everyone? That's a lie that the European mind bought into. And until the European mind wakes up from that lie, it's going to continue to go badly for them because they're going to continue to believe that, well, we can't exploit anyone, so how can we be rich? You got rich long before you started exploiting anyone. You don't need to exploit people in order to get rich. You just need to believe in yourself. Self-determination, exactly my stance, with allowances for people to assimilate where they want to. So we agree. We definitely do agree on that, Gray. Absolutely. No, Latu Penny, watching from Cape Town, Blue Downs. Latu Penny, how are you doing, sir? China will invest less in SA than in Morocco, which they identified as a major role player in their economic future. I would not be surprised. Read Cine van Rensburg about Europe. Joe, I have. Knight of Justice. Yes, the things that's happening in in Paris is absolutely insane, and I'm actually quite worried because I have a very very good friend who lives in France. She is French. Luckily, she's not close to Paris, but it definitely worries me. She got married like 3 weeks ago, just about to start a family, and it looks like Paris is on the verge of collapse. And I'm worried that if Paris collapses, it might just drag the entirety of France into it. In a self-determination society, what would happen if the masses forced themselves in? So, David, if we lived in a self-determined society, we would have our own military, or on the off chance that you do have a government that allows it. So let's go back to my perfect world. In my perfect world, where I am the government allowing for self determination, right? I will have a military specifically built to stop invasions. So if someone tries to invade one of the self determined areas, the military of the country responds and defends that area against that invasion. But I would still ask areas to start building their own militaries so that they can keep themselves safe from any oppression, including the oppression of the government. Right? Because I actually do believe that that's the one oppression that we should actively be very afraid of all the time. UK is also gone. I was in Birmingham 2 weeks ago, and it's Joburg Central 2.0. Martin, what I mean when I say France is or Paris is gone, have you guys seen the protests and the riots that's breaking out in Paris? And it's all because of uncontrolled immigration. It's because they have allowed third world people into first world countries, and now suddenly the left is Pikachu face about why these third worlders will not integrate. It's like, well, because they can't. Their cultures are not compatible. In their cultures, they believe that gay people should be thrown off of rooftops. Even the staunchest opponent of homosexuality in the West agrees that that's a bridge too far. Like, the worst I'm arguing for is that gay people shouldn't be allowed to get married in a church. Like, that's literally the worst that I'm arguing for. But if you tell me, well, we're going to throw them off of rooftops, I'm going to be like, okay, I'm going to go. Good luck with that. Um, but definitely that's a bridge too far. They come from cultures where a woman isn't allowed to show her face, let alone ankles. Holy crap. If a woman shows her ankles, that's death. I live in a culture where I think, yes, there are limits to how women should be dressing, but I wouldn't force it. Right? I wouldn't say it's illegal for a woman to show a tummy. I would say that you probably shouldn't dress that way. Right? It's probably not good to be dressing in such a way that men can basically see everything. But if you want to, I'm not going to stop you. That's sort of your right. You're free to live as you want to live. You know, um, how can we ever be compatible with these people? And Europe is finding out the hard way that they can't be compatible with these people. It would be called apartheid again. I agree with you, but history has a way to rhyme. In this instance, the reason apartheid was wrong, as I have said before, was because it was forced. People weren't given the choice. I don't believe that anyone in the world would call South Africa apartheid if there is a complete freedom of choice. You can live wherever you choose to live and with whomever wants to live with you. And it is completely free choice. And yeah, you're going to end up with certain villages that are Afrikaner only, some that are English only, some that are Zulu and Xhosa only. But you're also going to end up with a lot of towns and villages and cities that go, no, we want multiple people to live together. You're going to get capitalist societies, conservative societies, liberal societies, communist societies, and everyone is going to live in the best way for them. And it's going to be completely free, right? Everyone makes their decision freely. It doesn't take an intellectual genius to understand that third world countries can and will integrate in Western society. Um, that third world countries can and will integrate in Western society. Wait, Joe, what do you mean? Because third world countries, in general, can't and won't, in my opinion. If you're saying that they can, I would like to know why you think that they can. Have you heard of the white replacement theory? I have heard of it, yes. Um, I don't think that I think the white replacement theory is sort of right in a roundabout way. But I don't think it's correct insofar as the idea isn't to replace white people. The idea is to replace conservative capitalists. The idea is to replace people who care about freedom. The idea isn't so much to like the reason they're opening their doors to third world cultures is because in the third world, those people are perfectly happy with dictatorships. It has nothing to do with the skin color of the people in the West, in the Middle East, right? They're not looking at the skin color of the people in the Middle East and thinking, "Oh, we want all our people to be brown." That's not the reason. The reason they want the people from the Middle East is because they have identified that these are people that are easily controlled. And because these people have never known freedom and don't really care about freedom, if you want to build a government that is effectively a dictatorship, you want to fill it up with people that are effectively okay with dictatorships, right? So it's not about replacing white people. It just so happens to be that white Western cultures have stumbled upon the idea of freedom as a result of Christianity and Christianity's influence. This idea that the individual must be free. This is a very Christian value. And because Christianity really sparked in Western society, this became part of the culture. And so the idea is we want to remove all the people who don't want who don't want to submit. We only want to keep those who submit. So they're perfectly happy with the white leftist that wants a more centralized government system. That leftist is fine, and they're not going to force that leftist to sleep with immigrants or whatnot. They're going to be fine with that. The idea is more we want to get rid of the racist whites, the racist guy that doesn't want all this integration and immigration. That's the guy that we want to get rid of, because that's the guy that won't submit to our control. Look, good sir, I think your mic needs a compressor or voice enhancement. I noticed that when you say certain words at the end of a sentence is almost inaudible. I think my mic needs a lot of things, but I barely ever focus on the mic. And because when I'm live streaming, I obviously can't really do it, but when I'm editing it, I try to fix it in post. The problem that I've always had is compressors just end up feeling weird, and I don't know that much about sound engineering. So, yeah, I probably need a lot of work on this mic, even though I'll see if I can fix it at some point. We are easily pliable. I think so. Although I don't know necessarily if that is true of all people, but it's definitely true of some. It's definitely true of some. Do a people create the environment, or does the environment create the people? I think it's a chicken and the egg scenario. I think the environment has as much of a role on the people as the people have on the environment. And if you think about it, human beings have to some extent the ability to change their environments. So we do adapt our environments to ourselves, but obviously if you're living in a harsher environment, you're going to most likely have a harsher culture. If you're living in a more peaceful environment, you're going to have a more peaceful culture. Um, I think it's a lot of things. It's sort of like the argument between nature and nurture. We know that nurture is the biggest element, but it's not like nature isn't present. Nature still plays a role, even though nurturing is far more important. Racism saves lives. We have an international bias for that reason. David, I do agree with you, right? And there's definitely a reason why at one time racism or tribalism played a massive role. If you're from a tribe and you see someone that isn't from your tribe, it's probably a good idea not to befriend that person or not get too close, because that person might want to kill you. So that I fully understand. But I would argue in the new world or in the modern age, that tribalism should be adapted, and I think is being adapted to more ideological, right? So I'm happy to accept any capitalist from anywhere in the world, but I'm very unhappy and very racist towards any communist anywhere. I have a severe dislike of communists. and I mean severe. So I would say that since we're a lot more integrated now obviously humans change, as the age moves on, humans will change and humans will adapt. And so as ages change, as times change, because we're more integrated today, you're probably not going to look um, your children's children is probably not going to see a colored person or a black person and have any sort of strange feeling about them, right? That's just going to be another person. They've seen black people and colored people since birth, so it doesn't really matter. But they are going to spot someone that is an ideological opponent. That they're almost definitely going to spot. And that's going to be something that they are going to be afraid of, that they are going to be sort of standoffish by. So I do think that's going to change, but I think tribalism, insofar as we all need a tribe to belong to, that's always going to exist. Always. There's no way of changing that. That's why my tribe is capitalists, conservatives, and Christians. That's my tribe. And I view myself as a Christian first. I am a Christian before I am anything else. I mean, everything else falls in place, right? I'm a Christian before I'm an Afrikaner. I'm a Christian before I'm a conservative. I'm a Christian before I'm a capitalist. Christian first, then conservative, then capitalist, then Afrikaner. That is my identity. That is what I hold as my identity. And that is also how my tribe is set up. So I can accept anyone that is Christian into my tribe, provided they are truly Christian. I can accept anyone into my tribe who is conservative, provided that they are truly conservative. For me, my race, I think, has like the only time my race ever really mattered to me was, I think, when I was age 17, 18. When I was still in high school, I went through a period of super racism, where I believed white people to be superior and whatnot. Um, and I actually outgrew that because of a question that my dad asked me that sort of allowed my entire worldview to crumble as a result of it. And then I moved out of that, and I very quickly realized that's not really, you know, um, that's not how the world should be set up. When are you gonna start your tribe, Stefan? I think I'm building it already. Christ built it for me. I'm just part of it. As a Christian, you should understand all people are divine from God, even if they are different. Ability is 80% genetic. Divinity is 100% the same. All people are divine from God. Well, all people were made in God's image, sure. I'm not entirely sure I would agree that it's divine from God. Humans are not divine. We're very messy, very broken, very needy, and helpless. We're most certainly not divine. Race does matter, though. If your race goes extinct, it does matter, of course. Of course. You should care about your race. Absolutely. Um, but it's almost as if, and I'll say this to you guys, this is something that's very interesting to me. And I think I had this discussion with you before, but it feels like there's maybe a built-in thing around this. You can look across the world. You can go to the most woke cities on earth. And what you will find in all of those woke cities is 90% of all of the people in those cities date and marry people that is the same as them. Like, even the most woke cities on earth, the most woke people on earth, the white woman and the white man will be married. It looks like around 10, maybe 15% of any given race group will step over the boundaries of race and sort of marry someone from a different race, which is also important because having those genetic influences sort of cross over allows for strengths and weaknesses to be passed and sort of reveal a lot of the weaknesses within those different races. But it does appear that there's sort of like a built-in structure where the majority of people from a given race stick to their own racial group. And there's enough people that walk over the racial group or over that racial barrier to allow for genetic strength, genetic prosperity, and all the rest of it to happen. So I'm not worried about that. I don't really think that we need to fight to keep any given race alive because I think races will continue to survive. Um, I don't think that should be the focus because you're ultimately just not going to get it. I know my own life. I know black people who they don't mind white people, right? I know a black guy who told me, yeah, you can see that there's some white girls who's cute, but black girls just do something for him. I'm like, that's fair, bro. That's fair. You don't have to. Right? You can see, oh, that's a cute black girl, but white girls just do it for me. Right? That's perfectly fair as well. And that appears to be how most people of a given race think. So I'm not too worried about that. Why does it matter? Cora, I think it matters just because it's who you are, it's who your ancestors were. There's value in it. No one wants to see any group of people just be phased out. Um, and so there are people for whom it matters. I know of people who don't even want to marry outside their own language because they want someone that speaks the same language as them. That's fair. People will have different things that they prioritize, and I think that's fine. Well, I'm extremely mixed. My own household is mixed, and I feel I'm better for it. Corin, you're welcome to that, right? And that's great for you. I don't judge anyone for their views on either. If you want to mix with people from other races, or if you are, brilliant. If you don't want to and you aren't, brilliant. Who cares, right? It's not my job to prescribe to people how they get to marry or not. And I view that both ways. Right? People should be free to do what makes most sense for them. Because I will also just go on record here and say, I don't necessarily think that, or I know for a fact that it's not wrong for people to marry across race. There's nothing wrong with that. But marriage is already super difficult. It's not an easy exercise. Anyone that's ever been married will know. It's very hard. If you then also include different cultures, that makes something that is already hard much harder. So I fully respect that there are people who just go, I want to marry someone that's like me. I want to marry someone that shares my views, that shares my culture. And you know what? There's people that have things that you might think is small. Like, I want someone that can give me children that have blue eyes or that have blonde hair or that have, big toes that sort of crooked or whatever the case might be, right? There's all sorts of things that people want. And I'm not really one to say this is right or this is wrong. If that's what you want, that's what you want, and go forth and be merry. I'm not going to prescribe to people how they must date or not date or marry and not marry. I think it at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. And I think it looks, at least to me, as if most races have built into themselves a sort of fail-safe against being completely replaced anyways. Where, you know, the majority of that race is just attracted to people of their own. And so it seems to me like it would be a worry. You'd worry about something that wouldn't even happen anyways. So I'm not worried. That I will agree with Stephen, especially when it comes to dealing with family. Yeah, that makes sense too. They want to preserve their culture. Absolutely. The topic fundamentally limits preference. I don't like that. I like white women because I am a white man. That should be okay. Yeah, but determining, as I said, you like what you like. From my perspective, preference is as important as everything else. Desiree, how are you doing? you should like what you like, Like, I know guys who have an absolute hard on for Asian girls. Can't get enough of them. Want to marry an Asian girl. Go for it, bro. Do what you do. I'm not gonna stand in the way of what your preferences might be or what they might not be or where you fall on that issue. Yeah, waifus. I know plenty of guys that want waifus, especially in the gaming scene. Almost every gamer I know wanted an Asian waifu. That's fine. I would say now that I've come to a little bit more of an understanding about my own human inequity and sin, I have come to severely question my own attractions. The things that we pass off as preference. Um, because I don't know how much of my preferences are based in lust, almost entirely based in lust, based on some unachievable idea of something that no woman could ever actually aspire to. And so I'm very skeptical of my own attractions, my preferences, so to speak. I'm highly skeptical of it. My worry is the anti natalist tendencies of the left, especially in the West. I think, CCS, that the reason I'm not worried about the birth rates in the West is that I believe God is in control. And I do believe that it will change. There will be a moment where it snaps back. I can already see a lot of young people starting to run to God for meaning. Just as in the scientific world, more and more scientists are now starting to realize that naturalism doesn't help. There's things that you can't explain through a naturalist worldview. Um, I think the world is starting to realize that naturalism doesn't answer the biggest question that we have as humans. Why? Why am I here? And it would appear that simply telling people that that's a stupid question to ask leads to severe depression. It's like humans can't function with the idea that there's no purpose, which should tell us that's the wrong answer. If you tell people, "Oh, there's no purpose to existence. You're just here and then you're gone," and that leads to a massive explosion in suicide as a result of the teaching, then clearly that's the wrong answer. Because I believe that humans have this built in instinct to understand uh, purpose. We understand that there is a purpose because we are purpose driven beings. And you can see it. Young men and women are searching for truth. And I believe they'll find God again and they will start having babies again. So I'm not worried about that part of it. We like you, shut up, Frank. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Chris, nihilism, true. Interracial marriages that the media portray in reality are two different worlds apart. Joe, very true. Desiree, thank you. I appreciate that. True. Lust does have a small part to play in it, but it's not as important in the world makes it as the world makes it out to be. The determining. So for me, and I guess I'm a little bit more personal than what I think most of you have signed up for, but I was severely addicted to pornography in my BC days, like severely. Um, and so lust became almost like a central tenet of my existence. It's just I became almost just naturally inclined in it. And so for me, I know for a fact that my lust plays a massive role in my preferences and what I see as beautiful because I now, through the grace of God, have the ability to look at some of my preferences, and upon inspection, it's revealed just what a bad preference that would be and how that would be absolutely catastrophic. So I actually think it plays a much bigger role, at least in my life. I'm not speaking for everyone else, right? I'm sure there's some of you who maybe never struggled with lust in that same way, maybe never had to go down the roads that I walked down. And if you haven't, absolute praise to God that He protected you from that. Um, but He did not protect me from that. Although He did protect me from a lot of stupid things that I would have done otherwise. That is the one thing that He allowed me to go down. So I understand. I can't trust my preferences. You have social media videos about passport bros. Make it as if marrying outside your race is sunshine and roses. Oh yeah, I definitely don't think that it's sunshine and roses. People that I've spoken to who are interracially married have all said the same thing. It's hard. It's tough, especially since most of the time, if it's interracial, it's also intercultural. It's very rare that you get, say, for example, it's very rare that you get uh, uh, an Asian woman from America and a white man from America, but both are super American culture, and they get married. In that case, I think race it doesn't do anything because they're the same person effectively. They come from the exact same culture. Most of the time, you'll have like an Asian girl from Korea marrying a white man from America, and there's going to be super different things happening there. And that's going to be very different. And I'm gay, married to a man. God still loves me. Frank, God loves you, but not your sin. And I recognize that it is difficult for people to understand. I myself, in my own family, have a family member whom I love very much who is gay. And so I understand. I understand how hard it is. Um, because the world comes with this sort of lie that you're born this way, right? And so, how can it be sin when you're born this way? But to that, the argument is quite simple. As a straight man, I wasn't born to just have sex with one woman. That is most certainly not what I want. In fact, if I could have what I want, it would be a different girl every evening. Because there's plenty of beautiful girls and there's only so much time. But I know that even though I was born this way, that's still sin. Being married to one woman is no man's wish, but it is the command that it will be one woman for the rest of your life. Homosexuality is sin. End of discussion. The purpose, and in order to understand this, the purpose of sex at its fundamental level is the creation of life. That's why it's invented. That's why it's given to us, is to create life. When two men or two women engage in sex, their engagement can in no way ever lead to life. So if it can't lead to life, then what is the engagement? It's lust. That's what that engagement is. It's lust, right? Um, and so my prayer for you will be that God removes that sin from you and genuinely cares you, because I do know of men who have been, whose sin has been removed of them. Um, and that would be my prayer for you. But I'm definitely not sitting here saying that I'm without sin. So yeah, you can definitely serve God, absolutely. Um, but try, if I may be so bold, Frank, try not to justify your sin. Be honest with God. Repent of it. Say, Lord, I know that I am sinful. I know that being married, being in a sexual relationship, I know this is sin. Forgive me. He will. He's your father after all. The problem with sin usually comes because we try to rationalize it. We try to pretend like it's not a sin. That's a problem. Take it to God. Don't focus on the gayness now. Like that's the least of the issue. Take it to God. Trust him. You absolutely can help who you fall in love with. You are the master of your decision and more over your feelings. Love is not some esoteric concept. Echo, yes and no. I don't know if it's like I don't necessarily I think you can definitely help in terms of opening the door or not. Right? So for example, if you meet a girl, I'll speak from the perspective of a Christian man, right? As a Christian man, I believe that I should be married to a Christian woman. I should be married to a Christian woman. That is the instruction of God, that we must be equally yoked. And so, if I met a girl who isn't really a Christian, she's a bit of a wild card, she likes going out and drinking and having fun and, dressing a bit vicariously or a bit revealing and whatnot. And now I sort of ask her out for coffee. We go on the first date, and I start to realize there's some problems here. Maybe I spot that she's a little bit, lustful and she's a little bit this. But I continue to ask her out for coffee. Me falling in love with her was absolutely my choice. I could have slammed the door on that relationship 4 or 5 dates earlier. I persisted long enough that this person now sort of the sin overrode all of my natural instinct. So in that way, yes, you have a choice. But once it happens, so once you're on that 5th date with this girl that it clearly isn't Christian, and you suddenly realize, I can't live without this girl. I don't believe that's your choice. I believe that connection it happens. And when that connection is made, it overrides everything else. Hey, you can drink as a Christian. Determining the point was more over drinking. So every single night in a different bar, drinking ourselves to death or passing out. So the point isn't drinking a bit of wine or a bit of drink every once in a while. Although if I got married, I would probably look for a wife that doesn't drink because I don't drink, right? But if she did drink, everyone I know drinks wine and stuff like that. But I personally don't, and so it'd be very awkward for me if if my wife wants to go on a wine tasting and I really don't want to go on a wine tasting because there's no point. Uh, partake in each other's culture. My husband is Afrikaans and I'm Nigerian, Brazilian, no complaints. Okoro, nice. Nice. I definitely, as I said, I think it makes it harder, but not impossible, right? Nothing is impossible. It is genuinely just more a case of when you go from one culture to the other and you get married outside of your own culture, it just adds complexity to an already complex scenario. Because where normally you would have to compromise, now you really have to compromise on a lot, right? So I think a lot more communication is required. There's a lot more sort of sensitivity that is required around certain things and around how certain people think. In the past, you and your wife may have had some disagreement about whether or not you should use the belt or the shoe to beat the crap out of your naughty child. Whereas now you and your wife might absolutely disagree between even disciplining your naughty child, right? And how that should happen. And this would require way more thoughts than what would otherwise have happened. So, no, I definitely agree with you there. The difficulty will be with extended family, especially aunts and uncles. The ANC is just using xenophobia as a smokescreen to divert the eyes from them over their race laws and their foreigners don't take jobs. They set up their own businesses. It's the ANC's fault. She speaks Afrikaans and she probably know Boer history better than you. Um, if you ask her, she will tell you she is an Afrikaner. Um, Problem with Afrikaners are they think someone that speaks Afrikaans is their friend. Joe, we don't think that. I think you underestimate just how skeptical Afrikaners are of pretty much everyone. Like, I genuinely think if you actually hang out with actual Afrikaners, you would realize that Afrikaners are probably the most skeptical people on the planet. If someone just greets them a little bit too friendly, and every single Afrikaner is immediately like, what do you think they want? I don't trust that guy. He's way too friendly." That's like literally words that I have heard my entire life from all my Afrikaans family. Someone gets a little bit too friendly, and immediately the first thing says, "I don't trust him. He's too friendly." So no, definitely not that. Um, Definitely not that. I do think a lot of Afrikaners might be, and this may be your point, Joe. A lot of Afrikaners might be desperate to have at least someone fight for them, and so they're quick to believe, right? There must be someone that's fighting for them. So there, I definitely agree with you. That might be something, right? Love this channel. I'm not here to convince you of anything, Stefan. I enjoy your educational content. Keep up the good work, Frank. Thank you very much, dude. Really appreciate you. Um, and yeah, I'm not trying to convince you. I don't believe that I can. I believe that that is the role of the Holy Spirit. And so, from my side, if you don't mind, I will be praying for you, um, as I do for many of my viewers. Whenever I see some of you going through stuff, I do include you in my prayers. And outside of this, I have no judgment that I can render unto you, because I myself am not without sin, and specifically not without lustful sin. Um, so I can only be honest insofar as what it is, right? And I will never excuse sin, but also at the same time, I I will not pass judgment on it. What's wrong with the mods, Knight of Justice? What would you like the mods to remove? Um, I was raised English, but come from Europe, from German stock, and I'm super suspicious of everyone. The determining it's probably the German in my family then as well. Jace, thank you very much. Really appreciate that. SCA's fishing. We are the most hated people on this planet. I don't know if that's true. I think there are people that hate us, but I don't necessarily think that we are the most hated people on this planet. I think a lot of people actually love Afrikaners. Um, and I definitely think as the fight heats up between communists and capitalists, those who love freedom and those who hate freedom, I think as that fight continues to heat up, I think there's more and more people who are starting to adhere to, or starting to accept that conservatives around the world needs to stand together, because the fight that we're fighting is global. The communists are not just sticking to their own countries. They are absolutely working together in trying to turn the entire world into a communist hellscape. And so I do think you are starting to see, with MAGA in America, for example, reaching out to Afrikaners and minority groups, which is quite interesting to me that Trump specifically also included minority groups in South Africa, because I think Trump understood those minorities that hate the communism of South Africa, they're going to be the ones drawn to this program. right? And that's what he's trying to get. He's trying to get conservatives into America, because I think he understands that there is a battle coming between communists and capitalists. And we're going to have to figure out how to stand together, because the left is almost certainly going to make this into a global thing. Because people believe all Afrikaners wanted apartheid. I, for one, hate apartheid. That ruined my life as a white person. I don't hate apartheid. I hate the manipulation of it. But apartheid, as just a general rule, if we're just talking about the intention of apartheid, there's nothing wrong with it. Intention wise, it's fine, right? Because its intention was never to be racist. The intention was for completely separate development. The problem was in the application. The first, and as I've already said here, it was the force element. People don't like being told what they can and cannot do. So the second the government forces people to separate, you're going to get clashing. People don't like being forced. But then you had a bunch of very evil people who started to take advantage of the system, right? And eventually those people got into government. And then they started to really exploit the system for their own gain. That's where it became evil. But this should also prove to people why you want a very small and incapable government. Because the larger the government is, the easier it becomes for that government to force its own control onto the people, right? And do all sorts of crazy things. So yeah, that would be my determination. But, ladies and gentlemen, we have gone for too long now. We have been here for 2 hours and 11 minutes, and I want to keep to about an hour, except for Fridays where we go a little bit longer. So I'm going to blame 100% all of you on the fact that this is too long. If you guys are watching the VOD afterwards and wondering, how long is this? Not my fault. Blame chat. They were the ones who made things interesting, and I just kept responding. I'm not to blame for this. So take it up with the people in chat. But no, I truly did enjoy spending time with you guys. It was my absolute pleasure to have all of you here. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming out, for hanging out with me, for spending your time with me. I hope that there was some value provided to you, and hopefully you'll watch my video at 5 o'clock this afternoon, where we go into a lot more detail about employment equity and all the things that's coming. As always, ladies and gentlemen, be good to each other. Be kind to each other. And I will see all of you in the next one. Peace.